Welcome to the Second Mess Podcast, one-stop shopping for Norwich nostalgia, networking, and news from the Hill. Stand by for your host, Randall H. Miller.
Welcome, and thank you, Fawn, for all that you do around here. I have a distinguished featured guest today. Brian Doyle, class of 94, retired lieutenant colonel, General Motors executive, and now our vice president of development and alumni relations. Been on the job just a couple of weeks now. He is joined by, what's this guy's name, Fawn? Dunne. First name. He is joined by Brian Dunne, JD, class of 2013, current president of the Norwich University Alumni Association. He's been on the show a whole bunch of times. And he's back tonight. These two are tag teaming this to talk about development, alumni relations, current state, ideas for the future. And I'll let you hear it directly from them. Enjoy this. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Very well.
Great to be here.
Brian Doyle, you are up in Northfield in your temporary housing.
I am. I'm right on Central Street, next door to the president, enjoying life.
Central Street. We should have bought it all when we had the opportunity. Okay, I got myself off track already. And Brian Dunne, you are joining us from Beverly, Massachusetts, your mansion, I believe.
I am, yes.
Welcome. Good to have both of you here. Brian has been on before. Well, both of you have. Dunne's been on a bunch of times, usually with Cadigan. But Brian Doyle was on, for the listeners. If you haven't met him before, you'll get to know him a bit now. But he did a movie review with us. It's got to be like 2 or 3 years ago at this point, isn't it?
It was COVID.
Probably so.
Lords of Discipline.
Yeah, I'm the voice for Lords of Discipline over Taps, and you guys all crap all over me, so it's all good.
It was a good review, though. So if you scroll through the episodes, you can go down and listen to that one. We haven't done a movie review in forever. We'll probably do one sometime soon. I got a few options written down here on my legal pad. But Brian, I'm going to call you by your full names just because you're both Brians. Brian Doyle. So we were cadets together. You're a year behind me. Distinguished career in the military. Then you retired. What were you doing? Do you remember, when did you find out that the vice president of development and alumni relations was available, and why did you decide to throw your hat in the ring?
So I mean, it's a job that I've been stalking for a long time. Definitely something that I label as a dream job. So I'm excited to be here. But as you said, I spent 23 years in the Army. I retired in 2017. Interestingly, I spent a lot of the time in the Army in higher education. I got selected to go and teach at West Point, so that they sent me to grad school for 2 years, and then I taught geography at West Point for 3. During that time, I also did my first deployment to combat when I went to Kabul, Afghanistan, and it was to stand up the National Military Academy of Afghanistan. Never thought my first deployment to combat would be to teach, but there I was, no kidding.
And at least you knew the geography, I would assume, right?
Yeah, that's right. I knew where I was going. And then, you fast forward, and my last assignment in the Army, I was the professor of military science at Tulane. So I had the military, I had some time in higher education. Coming out of the Army, my wife and I decided that we wanted to do something different. Didn't want to be a Department of the Army civilian or a contractor. Nothing against any of that, and plenty of people have been extremely successful doing it, and it's kind of a natural fit. But we wanted to try something different. Sent out 107 resumes, got 4 acceptances back. Turns out there's not that big of a market for tankers in the civilian world. But one of them was this opportunity with General Motors. And it was starting at square one. So literally I was teaching MS4s in the classroom one day, and I was sitting next to recent college graduates the next day at the world headquarters there in Detroit. And I learned a whole new skill set. I quickly worked my way up. I ended up working in distribution for GM, and really got a good a good dose of what corporate America is like. Did that for 7 years. So when this job came up, like I said, we knew we wanted to try this, and I'm like, hey, this is like the dream job for me. I mean, I got the military background. I'm an alum, which is obviously important in this role. I've had my time in higher education. I understand some of the challenges and the turf battles that occur there. And I had this time in corporate America where I understood, the demands on executives at that level and the challenges facing a lot of our alumni who don't go in the military, because there's a bunch of them out there. So I said, I've got the background that's just, in my opinion anyways, is perfect for it. I applied for it, and thankfully, after a very rigorous application process, I was selected, and I could not be happier.
Can you give us a snapshot of what that selection process is like? When you run the gauntlet, what's that look like?
It was a tough one. It was well done, and kudos to Bill McCullough, who really led it. We submitted our initial applications, and they went to the search firm that the university hired to conduct it. And they came up with the glossy application that you may have seen. It was posted all over the place, and we had to send in our application, cover letter, resume, and references to them. They screened through that, and they called people for the first round of interviews. Once they narrowed it down to a smaller pool, I think somewhere 8 to 10 people or so, that went to Bill McCullough and his team, and he had a cross section of the university, academics, development, the whole 9 yards. And he read a tough board. He gave you 3 minutes per answer. We were on video, and I was there in GM in Detroit, and we had a tornado drill in the middle of it. Right, the sirens start going off, and I'm on the camera like I am with you now, and I start looking up, and Bill's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, I gotta go. We got a tornado drill. I gotta evacuate the premises." I went down. All clear was sounded, kind of rapidly. I raced back up to the room. I got there, and Bill's like, "Sorry, you're still in the same time constraint, so you just lost 15 minutes." I'm like, but after that, passed that round, and then I came up to the university, and it was really first class. We had a whole day on campus, met with a variety of people from across the university. It was some deans we met with. There's an interview with a large board, met with facilities, met with commandant staff, and it capped off with an interview with General Broadmeadow. So it was no joke. And then he made the decision from there. He called me back. I had a second phone interview with him, and then the offer came through. So it was pretty rigorous.
Any idea how many applications they got initially, like before they whittled it down to their 10 or whatever? Like, what kind of response did they get?
It was fairly strong. I want to say it was probably around the 20 range. They had a good offering, and there were alums in there. There were academic people in there, and they also got applications from outside of the area, completely. Some stuff in other development, healthcare, and interest groups and things like that. So I think they were very pleased with the selection that they had, and I'm thrilled that they picked me.
Brian Dunne, Mr. President of the NuAA, did you guys have any role in the search committee? Did you guys have a representative on there or anything?
We did. We had one representative, Marion Burke, was a NuAA member, and then I was called by the consultant to offer feedback when the job was being developed, and it was a pretty productive call. It was about maybe 25 minutes of just back and forth, and then they finished it with some yes or no questions, and they were really straightforward. But it was, does the proper candidate for this role need to have higher ed experience? And my reply was no, but that's something that's good. Do they need to be an alumni? At the time, I said, yes, they need to be an alumni, but that was presuming that they were dealing with this huge swath of folks. Do they need to have military service? My answer to that was no. And do they need to live in Northfield, Vermont? My answer to that was yes. So
yes, big
sorry
yes.
about the zip code change, Brian.
It's all right. It's not a bad place to be.
But you do have to be on location for that. I mean, it's a big job. There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure, and I imagine metrics of how well you're doing. You got to be there. You got to know everything that's going on. So how's it? You're in temporary housing right now for a while before the family gets there.
Yeah, well, Melissa will join me here eventually too. She's her job has her kind of pinned down, but she'll be up here by the end of the year, one way or the other. I do have a rather humorous story for you about the night I got the selection that is definitely well worth repeating, and it attests to the strength of the Norwich Alumni outreach. General Broadmeadow called me in an afternoon in July. It was like, "Hey, we want to offer you the job. I asked that you don't tell anybody about it, but discuss it with your wife and call back and let me know." I'm like, okay. So I called my wife. I'm like, "Hey, meet me for dinner, and I got something I need to tell you about." She's like, "Okay." We get to the restaurant. We sit down. I'm like, "I got offered the job at Norwich," and she's like, "We're going to Norwich." And our waitress turns around and says, "You're going to Norwich? I just graduated in May." Like, oh God. Forget that you heard any of this. Be surprised. Don't tell anybody. But we're everywhere, which is a good thing.
Jackie. Good server. So your wife, you've been married forever, right? Did you guys date when you were a cadet too? So she's like been to the regimental ball and all that stuff?
No. That was awkward during homecoming because they had a great slideshow at our class reunion. There were lots of pictures with me and my girlfriend through most of college.
Oh, geez, sorry, never mind. Scratch that. Fun. Edit that part out.
But right thereafter, when I was a lieutenant at Knox, we met.
So what's it been like hitting the ground? Like, what's it? Day one, what'd you have waiting for you?
Well, day one was Monday of homecoming week, so it was quite the experience, and it hasn't slowed down. We have a great university up here and lots of dedicated people, and it's just amazing the pieces and parts. I guess I've always been fully engaged in whatever work I've been doing, and my biggest comment is I don't have any screen time. Like, this is probably the longest I've been in front of my computer in 2 weeks. It's all talking and networking and meeting with people, and it's great. It's fun to do this for a living. I'm not gonna lie. It's
and I should mention that you have been involved as a grad. You're one of the class agents for '94, along with Joker, right?
Correct. Yep, I did do that for a very long time. Turned it over though. Matt Stavro's carrying the torch.
That's right, Sergeant Stavro.
He's doing a much better job than I did. He's awesome.
So what are the big initiatives, or what's keeping you up at night or taking most of your time, like right now?
So, the good news is, in General Broadmeadow and Bill McCullough, I mean, we really have a dream team up here, in my opinion. Even before I got here, I breathed a lot easier when we had them. But we do have our challenges too. I mean, we went through a period of great turmoil, as I know you've noted on the show before, and there's a cost associated with that, and we have to rebuild our trust with the alumni base. We have to rebuild our outreach efforts, and we have some money we need to make up. The unrestricted fund that you keep hearing us talk about, the Norwich Fund, that's a very real problem, because that is our operating capability as a university, and until we bridge that gap, we're going to have some issues.
Brian Dunne.
Well, in terms of initiatives that the NuA is running up, Brian and I have been in contact over the summer, and it's been great. And one of the things that we've designated a committee for is benchmarking. So Brian, you, me, we all have experience as alumni, both in the volunteer role and then as sort of just Joe alumni. And we've seen, we all have advanced degrees. So we've got at least two alumni offices that we can compare. One of the early taskings from Brian, which I support and which I've hopefully given him the resources to look at, is benchmarking and ranking our alumni engagement in our alumni office against peer institutions. So Brian Gibbons, who's president emeritus of the NuAA, is leading that effort. He's looking at, other SMCs, other comparable colleges, and one of the most striking things is through his research, very early on, he identified that an appropriate peer group for comparing Norwich to is the all women's colleges in New England that admitted men in the 80s and 90s.
Interesting.
Which is not a natural connection, but it's something that he found. And my sisters went to Emmanuel College, which was all women until I think the early 90s. That's popped up. We've got two really great initiatives that just sort of wrapped. Last year, we did the centennial celebration of the Corps Cadets Ring. We had a lot of effort going into that. We did the ring celebration, the ring book. There was a planned ring ball, which we did not do, but a lot of work went into that one. And then the Women Kicking Glass initiative, which was handled by a separate committee, but with input from the NuAA and a ton of other constituencies. And their culminating event was the gala, which was Friday night. They raised a ton of money. It was great. And now looking at Women Kicking Glass 2.0, which will come out, probably be announced in the near future. We're sort of open to new initiatives. We're out on the market, such as it is. One thing, in addition to the benchmarking, is looking at clubs and seeing how we can take the club system that's in place right now and, revamp it, improve it, take the high performing clubs like Boston, New York, and DC, and use them as leaders for other clubs that are only holding one or two events a year, who are unsure of what kind of events they should be holding, unsure of, can they charge? If they can charge, what should they charge for those events? And providing them leadership structure and encouragement around holding, worthwhile events and getting engaged with alumni in their area.
If I could back up on just talking about the benchmarking, because the NuAA is doing some fantastic stuff, and I'm thrilled that they have agreed to help me with this project. When you look at alumni relations, and I think in the town hall that Brian facilitated with General Broadmeadow, he reaffirmed the fact that he is committed to rebuilding alumni relations as a distinct office within the university. For whatever reason, we essentially destroyed alumni relations as it had existed previously. It got taken down to the core. Diane Scalero is the associate vice president working for me, who is charged with standing it back up, and that really has a lot of my effort on it too. As an alum, I recognize that that's a key component to what the university, not only what the university can give, but channeling what our alums want to give back, which is probably the most important part of that. We're slowly getting staff in place and trying to buttress it so we can survive over the next year. But we really want to talk about what it's going to look like 5-10 years down the road and what it can be. And that's what I wanted to get across to NuAA, and what I wanted to ask them for help for. Because while it's horrible what happened to it, it's also a golden opportunity, because we can rebuild from the beginning. We keep talking about reimagining what alumni relations is. You've had a lot of great ideas. Chris Cadigan talked about them on your show a couple months ago now, and I love it. And I think we can get to something that really scratches the itch for our alumni, but we got to build it smartly. We got to get the right structure, we got to get the right funding for it, and we got to back the right events. And not only NuAA, but anyone listening to this podcast, I want your opinions. I mean, we want to do this right, and we want to do it the way our alumni need it. 2 weeks from now, when we're down at AUSA, hope you all show up for that too. It should be a fantastic event. We're going to introduce our Marine Corps president to the Army. But I'm also doing a side trip. We're going to go over to the United States Naval Academy and look at their alumni setup. They've agreed to throw the curtain back and let us see how they do outreach. It's not a perfect match, like Brian said, right? But we're going to try to get best practices from a number of places and then work to incorporate them.
Yeah, steal what works.
Right.
How big roughly is the department now? So all of your direct reports, development and alumni relations.
All in, I got like 27 people.
Is it that big?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well,
but alumni right now has 3, right? Alumni relations has 3 people. So we need to work on that.
Go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to point out, how valuable the breakout of that is, because it's impressive as far as Norwich department goes. But yeah, there is only 3 individuals supporting alumni relations, and the rest are all development focused.
Yeah, that's an issue. I didn't realize it was that lopsided. I didn't realize there were 27 people up there. I think I probably know 10 of them.
Come on by. I'll introduce you to them all. And like you, I agree. Like I thought I'm like, oh, I know everybody up there. And then I got up there. I'm like, oh, I don't know everybody up here, which is good. And, I was talking to them. The thing that struck me most, and not to say that, there aren't flaws. Like we did an AAR on homecoming to discuss, how we can make it better next year. But I said this to the staff when we concluded it. The number one thing that most impressed me is how adept all of them are at solving problems at the point of contact. And they understand commander's intent, and they fix the problem right there and then without having to escalate it, without, causing problems. It was flawless. I mean, it was really cool to see the way they react to, something bad happening and turn it into a positive.
So sorry, go ahead, Brian Dunne.
No, I was just the idea came to me this past alumni weekend and the weeks leading up to it, just chatting with Diane. It'd always be interesting to do sort of a man on the street, alumni on the street, to alumni attending homecoming, and you look around at all the programming, all the events, and just ask them point blank, say, how many people do you think put this together? And my guess is you would get wild overestimates. This is 120 people, and yeah, sure, commandant's office, cadets, they all help putting this on. But when you look at the core team that Brian's working with, it's extremely impressive seeing what a team of that size can do, projecting out, collaborating with other departments and other teams. And I don't think it's understood well by sort of rank and file alumni.
Mm-hmm. So Brian Doyle, you and I go back to the final days of Todd and the emergence of Rich Schneider, and things have changed a lot. The Kreitzbergs, the Jack Bears, the guys from, at that point, we still had some guys from the 40s involved, 50s, 60s are waning. And we're following on the time for the folks who graduated in like the 80s and the 90s. But but here it comes, right? And this is difficult to quantify, but I know you know what I'm talking about, is that there's I don't know what the right word is there. Not lack of enthusiasm, because they're certainly enthusiastic with their opinions. But there's some bridge building that probably needs to be made with a whole bunch of people from the 80s and the 90s. Have you given that much thought?
Oh yeah, all the time. And you're spot on. I mean, we need to rebuild some bridges. We need to, reconnect with alumni. You bring up some interesting points. And when you look at the higher education landscape as a whole, there are fewer students entering college now than there were in the 90s when we were there, right? I mean, soon after we left, you remember at some point there were students living in the basement of Plumley because we didn't have enough room in the dorms, right? Those days are over, and it's because, well, for now, those days are over for now because of, a demographic shift, and there just simply aren't as many, students out there to attract as there were back then. And we need to be smarter as a result, right? During the Schneider years, he did awesome things. I mean, the man is a legend, and he was all about growing the university and adding buildings and adding capacity. That's not our challenge right now. Our challenge is maintaining what we have and strengthening what they have so that it will last. And I'm not just talking about buildings. I'm talking about the university. I mean, all you have to do is look through the news, and there are schools in New England that are closing.
Yep.
We have a great mission statement. We have a great brand, and it's unique from all those schools out there. So there's every reason why we should and we will survive. But we need to strengthen what we have. We need to, come up with a plan to have endowed professorships. We need to come up with plans so that buildings are maintained and kept in top condition, because we're not going to build new ones, and the size of the core isn't going to exponentially increase. We want it to increase a little bit, but it's not going to be like, people sleeping in the basement of Plumley. We need a strong, self-sustaining school that can do that. And it leads me to another point. When you look at our alumni, we are some of the most generous and dedicated alumni out there. Schools would, kill to have participation rates in fundraising like we do. Our alumni come through when asked. But that's not a sustainable model either. My team, we need to change the way that we go after funds. We need to target corporate money. We need to go after foundation money. We need to bring in streams from other sources other than continually going back to our alumni. We still need you. I'm not saying don't keep the checks coming in, but that should help sustain us while we really get the money from other sources.
So a lot of these guys that we're talking about from those 2 decades have been, they're not lost sheep. I don't consider them lost sheep because they're still around, just sometimes kind of grumpy. But we do have a significant number of grads, going back even further and more recently, who are just off the grid, just sort of disappeared. Those are our lost sheep.
Yeah.
We need to really try to tap in to invite them back to their place in formation.
Yeah.
But more importantly, make sure that we start training people now when they're seniors in high school to understand what they're getting into. And I've said this a few times on the show, so I don't want to be redundant, but it's appropriate here, is I think our fundamental problem there is that many Norwich grads don't understand the basic value proposition of Norwich. If you do this, you get this, right? And they go there, they go to school, and then they just disappear. And that's good. You're going to get a lot out of that, but you're getting a fraction of what you could get out of it.
Right.
So it's convincing them when they're seniors in high school, and I'll add this is important, and their parents, because the parents get that part, is you go to this school, you go through this tough training, you will grow, become a great person, and that's your dues card. And then you're in the group with us for the rest of your life. You tap into that network and you will reap the benefits until the day you die. Is getting them to understand that as early as possible. Then we don't find ourselves like now looking back saying, oh shit, we got people who graduated 35 years ago who don't answer 802 calls.
Yeah. No kidding. You're absolutely right.
One cohort that, as they come up in years, and I think next year will be the first sort of big year for them, is the COVID classes, because these were students who just had a really bad experience through no fault of their own, through no fault of the university. But if you go to them and you try to tap into those key memories, hey, remember Reggie Ball? Hey, remember Junior Ring? They have no connection to any of those key of commencement commissioning. How many of them were, Zoom commissionees or something crazy like that,
or got their ring in the mail.
Yeah.
I had Peter Orlandello, one of the Fins and Feathers guys, young guy, class of 2020, on last week, and his senior year ended in March. Like overnight, it was like, go home. And just, through no fault of the university, but just robbed of that that final experience of that last semester, which is a really important one.
It is. It is. And that's why organizations like NuAA and our club system are so important, because we can still reinforce what it is to be a Norwich grad through those associations and through networking with them, getting them out, but be it the cigar event in a couple of weeks in Boston, stuff like that should connect and make them feel like they are part of the family, because we have a great value proposition, as you said, and I think they'll still feel the benefit of it.
And maybe for some of those events, this just hit me, so I'll say it. But like that cigar event or any other event, have one that's the theme is specifically COVID years. Like target them specifically. Come out, come to this. We're putting this together with you guys in mind, and then I don't know, do something special for them when they're there, just to get them back into the fold.
Yeah. I did want to mention one other thing too, and something that I owe Brian. He's helping me with the benchmarking, but the second piece to that is elevating the status of NuAA, and that board needs to be seen as a serious and important board that needs to be listened to and needs to be included in the discussion. I'm glad to know that they included you, in the process for hiring my position. And I'm going to take concrete steps to do that. And I just ask people who get offered, a position. I know Brian is looking for that right now, right, to add to the board. And I want everyone to consider that, because can I step into the second mess confessional for a second, because I have a dirty secret to share. About a year ago, I was approached and asked to serve on the Alumni Board. And I called some friends, and they're like, "Oh, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that." And I so wish I had, because it's a great group of people, and they have fantastic events. They have fantastic ideas. And I just think we as a university need to give them a bigger seat at the table, and we need to take that board a little bit more seriously. So, that's my confession and my pledge to make good on it by working Brian and his whole team in on more and more of what we do. Is that fair, Brian?
More than fair. And I appreciate it. I know the board appreciates it. There was a period where we had probably 20 applicants per open seat, and that's dropped off over the years. And, the big challenge is people go through lifestyle changes, the job changes, they're getting out of the military, they're doing something different, they're relocating, and they're not able to, commit to the application, or they're not able to fulfill their duties on the board. And it's honestly not easy. It's 3 times a year you're up on campus participating. There's a cost associated with that, 2 or 3 days. You're attending homecoming, and it's not your year. So these are all unplanned expenses, unplanned disruptions to your life. But I think the benefit is, you're dealing with people who all at their core care deeply about, the health of the university and the health of the alumni. And we have fantastic ideas, and a few of them get off the ground, more than a few, I should say, and become sort of programs of record. Legacy of Learning is a great example. That format sort of
I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, it started as sort of a TED Talk. And Randy, you and I attended one of the first ones together in North Andover on the opioid epidemic.
Yep.
And then most recently, we used that format for a Women Kicking Glass presentation for women in law enforcement.
Best event of homecoming weekend, in my opinion. And there were some awesome events, but that was spot. I mean, that's exactly what we need. There was great cadet participation. I get it. They were given credit, but no reason why they shouldn't be, right? That should not be seen as people are like, oh, they showed up because they got credit. Good. They need credit for that. And the board that you guys put together was just world class. Those women that were up there, pretty new to their, I say pretty new because I've been out for 30 years like you, Randy. I know they've got like 10, 12 years since they graduated, but they brought real world experience, and they shared it with cadets, and there were faculty there. There were some alumni there. That needs to be a core part of any homecoming that we do from this point forward, in my opinion. So, thank you for bringing that up, Brian.
President Dunne, can you, I'm sorry, you want to say something first, and then I got to shoot a question to you.
No, go for it.
Can you you mentioned applicants for the NuA board. It's been a long time. I was on there more than a decade ago. I did a 4-year stint, and I agree. I met some great people while I was there. But for the listeners, what's the process if somebody wants to join that board?
Sure. So the process is you'd fill out an application. It asks some biographical information, and there's a half dozen or so narrative prompts that get at your experiences at Norwich, your experiences as an alumni, and then what is your driving force behind wanting to get on the board. We've got 3 boards at the university. We've got the board of directors, the NuAA, the board of fellows, and the board of trustees. Each one serves a different purpose, and the fellows provide input on curriculum, so it's very academic centric. The trustees obviously manage the school from a fiduciary standpoint, and then the directors manage alumni programming and alumni events. And sometimes we get people who are like, well, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, everything you just described is a board of trustees issue. We can't help you. We're not hiring and firing. We're not opening new campuses. Likewise, I want to start up an internship program. That's great. That's not exactly what we do, but we have the connections where we can put you in touch with those faculty members, and you can leverage your experience and see what you can do. We look at the alumni history of the applicant's history of engagement with alumni events. So did you run a club successfully? Did you attend club events? When was the last time you were on campus?
Class agent, stuff like that.
Class agent, exactly. And some alumni, they wake up 20 or 30 years after they graduate and they said, I want to give back. They have no history of engagement with the university, no history of giving. And their first shot is to join the board of directors. And absent a really compelling application, they're generally not going to be selected because they went from crawling to running. Mm-hmm. And what we want to see is the walk phase.
Okay. And so you get applications, you guys go through it, you decide which ones you think would be strong candidates, and then they have to be voted on by the board, right?
That's right. So we have a committee. We stood up a full proper committee to do this. It used to be a one-man job. They'll review all the applications. They'll have a handful of recommendations, generally 2 to 3 times the candidates for the open slots. So if we have 10 open slots, they might throw, if we have 5 open slots, they might throw 10 or so applications for consideration. But we vote on the entire slate of active applicants. And it's worth noting, as a part of that process, we solicit feedback from Brian's team on just, have you run into this alumni in the wild? Do you think they'd be a good fit? What's your feedback? And that's where the alumni engagement piece comes in, where it's like, yeah, this guy runs amazing club events. He'd be a great ad. Let's get him.
And that's a 4-year term. I believe you can do 2 of them typically. And then there's extensions if you go into leadership or something like that, right?
Yeah. So if you get elected to an officer role in your final year, we're not going to cut your officer term short. But generally the standard term of service is you get voted on once. That's a 4-year pump. And then you can automatically renew without the need of going through an application again for a second 4-year pump. We did add some requirements around a cooling off period, because what we didn't want to happen is somebody takes a year off, runs a club or just does something different, and then immediately comes back and becomes this perpetual board member. So trying to avoid situations like that, because we do have a lot of passionate alumni. We have alumni who give a ton, and that process allows alumni both to ascend to the board. It also allows us, or it prevents us from burning alumni out. So if you're doing 16 years on the board of directors, somebody's failed you along the way.
And how many alumni directors are on the board?
24.
So there's 24. Okay. That's big.
It is, and it's important. And we need to, like I said, the two things I'd ask, one of them I got to do is give a bigger seat at the table. And the request that I have is, if you're out there listening now and you have something that you can give, please send your application in, because we need you. We need the right people.
What's the plan with clubs? Like, how many clubs do we have now? Are they all active? And how do we plan on injecting those clubs with enthusiasm and steroids?
So we have more clubs of record than we have active clubs.
Okay.
So I asked one of my directors to take a look at that, and it was sort of a three-part request. The first was to collect all the documentation that we have on clubs, standing them up, the processes that we have in place for the billing system, the registration system, the everything from the welcome correspondence that we send out to a new club officer all the way up to, here's the bright line of support that the school can offer. Additionally, I asked him to collect a list of all the clubs and the club officers, noting the term that certain officers have had. And the reason behind that is, we don't want one club to be dependent on one individual.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a really great club, but the alumni leading it gets hit by a bus tomorrow, does this mean, because they haven't brought in a vice officer of some kind or brought in any other volunteers, does that mean we lose the entire club because it hinges on one person? So succession planning. And then the third ask was to stand up routine all club officer calls where we can push out information, statistics like you might see if you host a freshman send-off, school health statistics, but also collaborating between those higher performing clubs that I mentioned earlier, and then some of the middle and lower performing clubs who they do one freshman send-off a year. It's successful, but that's the only event they do. We want to show them that they can do more. And not everything has to be a happy hour. It doesn't have to be a cigar event. You can go bowling. You can open up to families, have a holiday party, have a networking event during spring break.
Hey, one of my favorite events, I belong to the Cape Cod Club forever. And one of my favorite events they do is, Flags In at the National Cemetery in Bourne. They all get together and we put the flags into to all of the people buried there. And it's a fantastic event.
We've got some really unique events. I mean, the Club of New York City does a walking tour of Central Park.
Yeah,
That's
Willie Wright, my classmate.
Yep. So Willie leads that. They do an FAO Schwartz day.
At the RKO Music Hall.
Exactly. Boston does their cigar events. San Antonio does a wreath laying at the Alamo annually. And they also do a Wreaths Across America event. We've got some really creative club leadership, and my goal behind this particular initiative is to tap into that creativity and promulgate it out.
It definitely the creativity is a must. If an event doesn't have a hook to it, it is so difficult these days to get people to go out for anything, for any organization. It's not just Norwich. And happy hours kind of don't really cut it very much. I'm sure there's a few out there that do great with regular ones, but for the most part, it's like, if I want to go to happy hour, I can go every night if I wanted to. But when there's an event and there's a theme to it, or there's some sort of hook that's really interesting, that makes it enticing.
And the Club of the North Shore used to do an event where they would have an individual from the University Museum come down and do
that was me. That was me and Donovan and Kevin Sawyer when we were running that club. We had one of the archivists come down and bring a bunch of stuff, including some super old rook books. And then we told everybody who was coming, bring your rook book with you if you still have it. And we're going to give you prizes for whichever one's in the best condition and also whichever one's in the worst condition. And that I think we had like 40 or 50 people at that, which is for the North Shore Club, that was a huge crowd. I think it would probably be a decent sized crowd for any club.
Was that at the hardcover?
Yep.
A classic spot.
It was. And branching out to different spots too, I think kind of helps.
Yeah.
I guess, I think we're at a really unique place in the history of the university. I think 20 years from now, people will look back and see the Broadmeadow McCullough period as a point of inflection, a point of rebirth, and we just have to set the conditions so that we can accomplish that. We can meet the new challenges that Norwich is facing, and we can ensure that our brand's around for another 100 years. This is a decisive point in our history, though. We got to get it right.
Mr. President, closing remarks, and I will be fact checking.
Please do, especially on this one. So just one note for anyone who was at homecoming or who watched the stream. This was the first time that the reviewing platform for the homecoming parade was entirely alumni. It just hasn't happened. So we've got this really unique situation where president of the trustees, president of the fellows, president of the university, vice president of alumni and development, president of the board of directors, commandant are all grads. So for anyone who tuned in early or even on time, that platform was stone cold empty because we all processed in with our classes and then threw the guide on at someone and ran onto the stage.
I like that. So for me and the listeners who are just bundles of energy to get involved and help out, what can we do like today? What's the one step you would say you could do today besides call a buddy?
Look up your local club and register for their next event. And if they don't have anything planned until July and it's a freshman send-off, ping the university or ping the club officer who's listed and ask them why they don't have anything planned. We're going into the holidays. Hey, I'm in the club of Des Moines. Are we doing anything for the holidays? No, I don't have anything planned. Let's do something.
Mr. Doyle? I'm sorry, Colonel Doyle?
Just say, reach out. I want to hear from alumni. I mean, that's what my job is. I want to talk to as many people as possible. I'm going to start getting on the road and traveling. I'm going to start in DC, going to be in Chicago, going to go to Boston. But if there are alumni out there, I want to meet you. And I'd like to say I'm going to be in every club in a year. That probably won't happen, but that would be my ultimate goal is to meet as many people as possible. So if I don't come and find you, find me.
Well, I will put both of your preferred contact information down in the show notes. So anybody listening, just scroll down, look down there, and one click away, you can send off a note to either of these two fine gentlemen. Thanks for doing this, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity, Randy. Appreciate it. You do a great service for the university, and I appreciate it.
Fawn does all the work.
Thank you for listening to the Second Mess Podcast. We value your feedback. Feel free to email us your thoughts at secondmesspodcast@gmail.com. For complete information about the show and links to our social media channels, check out www.secondmess.com. Until next time, stay safe and stay connected.